Hi, I'm Michelle Christensen of michellechristensen.com, and earlier this year I gave my email subscribers the chance to ask me anything they wanted to about their business. This video is on setting up a time management system. It's the second of two videos answering the very first question I got. Now, the exact question was, I'm struggling with the time management system. I know many people use time trade, but I feel like I'm missing a step in setting it up. Any suggestions? In the last video in this series, I talked about time trade and why I like it. I also gave a demonstration with a screen share. You can find this video either on my blog or my YouTube channel under Ask Me Anything Segment 1. In this video, I'm going to share with you the exact tools I use to manage my time. As a solopreneur, being a good time manager is one of the most important skills you can have. When you wear all the hats in your business, everything you do has to be valuable. You have to stay on top of a lot of tasks and projects and manage your schedule. Now, I use three different tools to manage my time, and first I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll tell you how they work together and how I fit them together. The three tools are a calendar, a to-do list, and a timesheet. Now, let me start by saying that my current setup is only what I'm using right now. I regularly change my system as my work and life changes, and sometimes because I get bored with something and it stops working. And when something no longer works, I just find or create something else. Now, all three of the tools I use work together to make sure that I'm in the right place at the right time and working on the right things right now. Now I'm going to tell you how I use each tool. The first tool is my calendar. Now, I use a free calendar that comes with my Gmail account. Now, the fact that this calendar is free is terrific, but the real reason I use it is that it's simply the best online calendar, electronic calendar I've used, paid or free, and it's really the best of all the ones I've ever tried. It has a ton of useful features, and I love knowing that Google takes care of my backups. Now, there's a few rules I follow when using my calendar. And the first one is to keep only one calendar. Let me tell you a story about a friend of mine from a few years ago. She had her own little solopreneur business and wanted to keep two separate calendars. And her reasoning was that if the IRS ever subpoenaed her records, she could hand them just the calendar that related to her business, and they wouldn't have access to all of her personal details as well. Now, it sounds like a good idea on the surface, but here's the problem. You can probably guess what happened, actually. Things started getting mixed up between the two calendars and things like that. And I have my own personal version of this story. I have two separate Gmail accounts, both one for work and one for personal. And for a while, both of those calendars were showing up on my phone, but I only use one of them. And you can probably guess what happened. I was entering an appointment on my phone, and I entered it, and it went to the wrong calendar, and I never saw it from my desktop. Now, thank goodness the person I was meeting with called a few days before to confirm, so it wasn't a problem, but I did learn a lesson. So now I make sure that I only use one calendar and that calendar is the only one that shows up on my phone. Now, the problem is if you're going to use two calendars, not only do you need to maintain two separate calendars, but you need a set of rules for what goes on which calendar. Some things may be a hybrid of business and social, so which calendar does that go on? So now you need two calendars and you need a set of rules, and now you need to maintain the set of rules. And that's just way too much work. Way too many chances for errors that can easily be eliminated. So the rule is use only one calendar. Now, as far as what goes on the calendar, I like to follow the rule laid out in the productivity system called Getting Things Done. That's one of my favorite books and productivity systems, and I use a lot of the ideas in that in my everyday life. But in that system, the rule for what goes on your calendar are only appointments and things that must be done that day. So, for example, if it's somebody's birthday and you want to make sure you call them that day, but it doesn't have to be at a specific time, that's something that could go on your calendar for that day. But what you want to avoid is having your calendar just be like kind of a mishmash of tasks and ideas and appointments and other miscellaneous items. It should really be just those two things, only appointments and things that need to be done on that day. A final rule with your calendar is make sure that everything that should go on your calendar actually goes on your calendar. Don't rely on your head to remember things. Your mind is for working, creating, solving problems, and enjoying life. Don't cram it full of things that can easily be stored in a calendar. Now, the next tool in my time management kit is my to-do list. And when I talk about my to-do list, it's really two separate things. It's one big extensive container for all the tasks I have on my plate right now and in the future and anything I might be interested in doing. The other part of the to-do list is that part that pertains just to today. It's important to separate out these two different to-do lists. It's really inefficient to be looking at the entire universe of things that you have on your to-do list. It's hundreds or possibly thousands of tasks. And it's really inefficient to look at all of those every time during the day when you want to decide what the next thing you should be working on is. A much better approach is to look at your big list once a day and pull out a small selection of tasks that you're going to work on for just today. Once per day, you look at that big list and you make a determination about what's important today. And then as you go through your day, you make a choice of what to work on from a much smaller population of items. Splitting out your to-do list for today from your entire list is a simple concept, but it's hard to actually do it well. And there are some specific tips and practices that I can give you to make your to-do list for today much more helpful each day. In a free special report, I give you 5 tips for creating your daily to-do list so that you can get more done and feel less overwhelmed. Keep in mind that the great thing is that these tips are all about how to write your daily to-do list, not how to change what you work or what you work on. You can see great results just by changing the way you write your to-do list. So grab your copy of that free report at michellechristенsen.com/daily. Now, the tool I use to keep my full to-do list is called Remember the Milk. It's a free online task manager, and I found that it works really well and it holds everything I need to. For the smaller to-do lists that I write each day, I usually write it on a small piece of paper and I write it by hand. I go into more detail about writing your daily to-do list in the free report I mentioned earlier, and I will give that link again. Now, there's 2 more tips I want to give you on keeping your to-do list. The first is to make sure you only put tasks on your to-do list, not projects. A task is a small step you can do right now, and it might be something that you just do and cross off. A task might also be part of a larger project. For example, planning a vacation is a project that has many small tasks associated with it. Some of those tasks include things like booking a flight, renting a car, making a reservation, or buying specific gear. The difference between a task and a project may seem like a small distinction, but it's very important in being productive and not getting overwhelmed. The idea of doing an entire big project all in one day may seem intimidating, exhausting, and overwhelming. However, doing just one small task associated with that project will feel much more manageable. In our vacation example, if you put plan vacation on your to-do list, it doesn't give you a specific task to do. If instead you wrote something like book vacation flight, now you have a specific task that can be completed right now and you'll know when it's done. A second tip on keeping your to-do list is to make sure you have a place to store projects that you may want to do someday or ideas you have. When you have a place to keep these things, you can write them down and then stop thinking about them. They won't be pinging around in your brain and you won't be frantically trying to remember them. You can free up valuable brain power to focus on what you need to be working on right now. And you also won't feel compelled to work on these projects right away because you have a safe place to store them so you won't forget them. And I go into more detail in the report I mentioned earlier, which is called The 5 Biggest Mistakes Solopreneurs Make in Writing Their Daily To-Do List and How to Avoid Them. And you can grab that report at michellechristенsen.com/daily. Now, the third tool I use is a timesheet. And as an entrepreneur, you may feel some resistance to this idea because, after all, why be an entrepreneur if you have to fill out a timesheet? I started this practice several years ago and have found it to be really valuable in making sure that my time is allocated according to what my priorities are. Most of the time when people do a timesheet, they sit down at the end of the day or several times a day and they record how they spent their time. It's a record of what projects or activities they worked on, and the recording is done after the time has passed. I do mine in reversed. First, I set my priorities for my business, and I usually do this a few times a year. Then I decide how much time per day I want to devote to each of these priorities. Each day, I then follow that plan and spend my time in a way that is congruent with what I decided my priorities are. It's a great way to make sure that you're spending your time on what you think is important right now. Now, sometimes I need to be a little bit flexible in how I spend my time. I often go way over my target in a certain area when I have a deadline coming up. There's no problem with that. I either reevaluate my priorities and see if something needs to change, or I make up the time in the areas I neglected after the deadline passes. Now, I use a spreadsheet for my timesheet, and each column is one day, and then each row is one of the activities. And on the left, I name and describe the activity and list the amount of time I want to spend daily on it. Each day, I add a new column for that day in the morning, and as I finish all the work on a prior day, I delete that column. And if I have more than a few columns on my timesheet at a time, it means that I'm not keeping up with something and I need to make a change. So that's it, my time management system in a nutshell. Grab your free report, The 5 Biggest Mistakes Solopreneurs Make in Writing Their Daily To-Do List and How to Avoid Them at michellechristiansen.com daily. Once you grab that report, you'll get regular tips and strategies just for solopreneurs, and you'll be able to ask me a question about your business the next time I make an offer to ask me anything. Thanks a lot and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.